All right, what's up, everyone? Just thought I would try to make a quick video. That's a challenge for me to do anything quickly. But anyhow, had a few questions about some changes that I made, and brings to mind a couple other things that were maybe a little more subtle that I'd like to point out. Offer, this will be just my opinions, as it were. I'm not trying to pretend to be an expert, but when it comes to customizing games and seeing opportunities for personalizing them, it's always interesting to me to see what people do and where the balance between, as designed intent versus making it your own versus, things that they might have done, had they had the ability back in the day. So, as I discussed, making this playfield UV reactive was just something that I kept looking at it. I kept thinking this is a blacklight poster. It would have to glow. If they'd had that technology back in the day, the sound turns off, the lights flash, you get this weird countdown. Like, to me, that just seemed like an obvious thing to try, 30 years plus later, given some of the things we have now. But as far as other things that I did to this game, I'll just point out a few. So a lot of people will customize colored aspects. I'm not going to get into the whole clown puke color bombing debate. That's subjective, but along those lines, what I've seen on Sometime Fantasies is what folks will do is, hey, it's rainbows, it's colors, it's a really bright, colorful game, and don't get me wrong, that's why I love it. But I've seen people colorize these for a rainbow, and to me, that's like, well, if you study it carefully, those are yellow because it's part of these, I don't know, vines, plants, dingle balls. Dingle ball, just, you've got several things going on here. Best not to question too much. But I kept these yellow just because it matches that artwork. And I am personally not a fan of yellow GI, but I did use, or colored GI, excuse me, but I did use yellow bulbs here just to help enhance that color. Sometimes white GI can be really blinding in the face. The yellow, in this case, tends to mute it. I personally think it looks good, and it fits the art as intended. On a similar note, had the opportunity to kind of study things here, and I changed a few posts. So like this one is green, kind of looks like it comes up and goes through the plant. I changed that one there to be green as well. This one here is purple because it blends the rainbow. These here are like a turquoisey aqua color because it blends into the bubbles. And the one thing I did here on this plastic, if you lay this plastic flat on the playfield, as originally designed, there's a blue and a purple stripe here. But when you actually stand at a player's angle, they misalign. So I blacked that one out and moved the purple down to help align better. And under harsh light, you can kind of see some of the brush strokes bleeding through. I may have to touch that up a little bit. I've given myself some time there. Another thing I did to change this, I personally was not a fan of the copyright notice as Williams originally did it. It was just big blocky text letters just right across the middle there. And I got to thinking, well, let's try to make that a little more subtle and a little more integrated. So I made a arch across the top of the rainbow, shrunk it down, and even put it under his foot. Just, give it a little artistic flair, like he's standing on it or something. So it calls your attention, but it's a little less in your face, as it were. One interesting thing I did that was kind of crime of opportunity. When I got this game, one of the switches was missing. I don't remember which one it was. I think it was actually one of the red ones. One of them was missing or broken. I had to replace it, and I was like, well, wait a minute. If I take it, I think the red one was still in the time tube, so I moved it where it belonged down here. And then I needed to replace the time tube, and I actually had another switch out of a Gottlieb game. I believe I got that off a Spider-Man playfield that I parted out years ago. But as it just so happened, when I was digging through my parts bin to see if I had a spare switch to use quickly, I had this one, the blue and red target, which sort of matched this art being outlined in blue and red. And I got to thinking, hey, it's pointing out to shoot there to spell time for the time ball, and artistically it kind of worked out. So that was kind of lucky happenstance. I happen to have that part. The question I was asked specifically concerning the pop bumpers, what type did I use? Did I do something to make those UV reactive? And that's kind of another, I'll call it a deliberate accident. So I am a big fan of clear pop bumper skirts because, originally these would have been white or some other solid color. And not knowing until you disassemble the pop bumper and it's, oh, wait, here there's a hint of it. There's this green ring on the uncovered dingle balls, but of course that green ring was under, the pop bumpers as well. Space Shuttle was the first game I discovered this. Under the pop bumpers on Space Shuttle is like a artwork, part of that like space station scaffolding that's in that area on the playfield. You'd never see it until you take the pop bumper apart and you think, well, wow, they actually put art here and it's covered. Why didn't they use a clear skirt? Well, because they didn't have them back then or didn't think it was worth tooling up back then, but we have them available now. I switched to clear skirts here, kept the bodies yellow, again, to kind of theme and tie into the vines here, or whatever you want to call them. And, of course, you notice there's a purple ring here. So I thought, hey, okay, let's go with a purple ring, on the top, just to try to mimic that. And I actually originally tried to use the original pop bumper covers that are yellow with the weird, that 80s, whatever, organic Dungeons and Dragons looking pattern. It didn't really seem to fit this game particularly well. It was just something that Williams used. I thought the lights would shine through there, and they did not. So, and in fact, it looked hideous. So I was like, well, okay, gonna go with something else. And actually, I used something else entirely different originally. I used the Bright Caps Evo inserts, and I can't hold the phone to get this out of the bag, or can I? Yeah. So these are from Pinball Life. I'd never used these before. I'm not going to say anything negative about the product. It does its job well. It's well made. It's a high quality, manufactured item. Sticks in there just the same as these rings do. The problem, as I discovered, and again, one of those don't know till you try type things, is I didn't realize until they arrived that the whole disc was white. And just, for me, the aesthetics with a clear ring, I already determined that the lights didn't shine through with the stock caps. So going to these clear ones, seeing that big white disc just didn't look right to me. And I thought, well, maybe you can paint it, but okay, I'm not going to do that if I don't have to. The other thing I discovered about the Evos is that these LED elements are side firing. So the element that actually illuminates, you can see that those orange specks, if it will focus, those fire inward along onto the surface of this white disc. The effect that you get is, okay, I gotta pose this here. This is kind of awkward. Can't do this with only two hands. The effect that you get is that you see the elements lit up, the ones that are facing you, but the ones that are pointed away, you don't. So instead of getting a nice complete ring aesthetic, you get this weird kind of distorted ovoid shape. Personally, I didn't like it. Under a properly illuminated cap, you'd never notice that. For this application, I deemed it to be a problem. So these are basically rings from Comet. I've used them before in my space shuttle. I think I've got them in my space station as well. Big fan of these. I love the look. They top fire. It's a consistent appearance and shape. The only problem is you have to glue them into the ring. So you can use a E6000 or hot glue, some kind of clear epoxy to fix them in place, because you don't want them to drop and hit your plunger, because that's going to cause a short, all kinds of bad stuff. You could get these in all kinds of color combinations. You could get the same color on the bottom. You can get them on white on the bottom, and there's a whole bunch of other colors, available. So to get to the point of the question I was asked, are these deliberately UV reactive? No, not sold as such, but what happens to happen And I'll give this a demonstration. Just bear with me while I turn off the light. Start a game. So interestingly enough, in Time Fantasy, these are GI. They're not reactive, they're not responsive to the game, they don't do anything related to controlled lamps. These are general illumination. But as it just so happens, and I can tilt this, I believe, to get... Oh, no, we talked about that. Ah! Funny. Okay, I guess it is disabled in the code. We discussed this. Oh well, that's what I get for not doing a demo. But yeah, so you see that these are GI controlled. Actually... Yep, I'm going to start time mode here. So these are not actually on right now, but for whatever reason, if you shine a UV light directly at a LED element, it glows. So that's one thing working in my favor. The other is that the white paint on the ring itself is reflecting that purple UV light. So the ring itself appears to be glowing purple, just like the ring below it. So that really worked out in my favor. It looks like those are reacting to the UV, but they're not. I mean, in a sense, they're reacting to UV, but not in the sense that like the rest of this UV pigment does. So sometimes you get some happy accidents like that if you're customizing things. You just kind of have to pay attention to the details, think about the effect that you're going for, and, you know, see what happens. Don't be afraid to make a mistake, because, yeah, some things you just don't know until you try. But I'm hardly an expert. I'm just an idiot. I like to play around and experiment, and it is over 12 minutes long. Wow. Yeah, what did I say about being quick? I don't have the ability. So, anyway, that's that. And if anyone has any more questions, I would be happy to answer.